Have you ever noticed how uncomfortable people get when they're left alone with themselves? The room feels louder, the silence feels heavier, and suddenly the phone becomes their best friend. We live in a world where being alone almost feels like a disease. Society has conditioned us to believe that happiness only exists when we're surrounded by people, validated by others, or loved by someone else. But let me ask you something. What happens when no one's there? What happens when the crowd leaves? The noise fades when the person you leaned on walks away. That's when most people feel the H of emptiness. But here's the truth I want you to really take in. That H isn't because you're alone. It's because you never learned how to be with yourself. See, the greatest tragedy isn't loneliness. It's being a stranger to your own soul. It's depending on others to make you feel complete when the real source of joy, strength, fulfillment has been inside you the whole time. And until you unlock that, you'll always be chasing happiness instead of owning it. This isn't just about enjoying quiet time. This is about freedom. Because when you can stand strong in your own presence, when you can wake up in the morning and know you don't need anyone else to feel alive, that's when you become unstoppable. You stop begging for attention. You stop settling for less. You stop fearing loss because you found the one person you can never lose yourself. If you stay with me through this speech, I'm going to show you how to make that shift. I'm going to share with you how to transform loneliness into power, how to build a relationship with yourself so unshakable that nobody can take it away, how to finally understand that happiness isn't something you find out there. It's something you build in here. So don't just listen with your ears, listen with your heart. Because what I'm about to share could be the moment where you stop running from yourself and finally step into a life of peace, confidence, and true happiness, even when you're completely alone. Most people hear the word alone and instantly attach it to pain, emptiness, or rejection. They think if they're alone, something must be wrong. It's as if their worth is somehow tied to how many people surround them. But the truth is, being alone is not the enemy. It's the training ground for everything you want in life. The problem isn't solitude. The problem is the meaning you've given to it. You've been taught to believe that loneliness is weakness, when in reality, it can become your greatest strength if you shift your perspective. Think about it. Every breakthrough you've ever had in your life, every deep realization, didn't come from the noise of the crowd. It came when you were alone, when you had a quiet moment to reflect, when you were forced to face your own thoughts. The world distracts you every second with noise, opinions, validation, and comparison. Most people never develop the skill of being at peace with themselves. They fill the silence with endless scrolling, endless entertainment, endless chatter, because they're afraid of what will show up in that silence. The silence is where the answers lie. The ability to sit with yourself, to breathe, to hear your own thoughts without needing to escape them. That's self-mastery. It's not easy because in that space you'll meet your fears, your insecurities, your doubts. You'll hear the voices you've been avoiding by drowning them out with other people's presence. But here's the beauty. Once you face those voices, once you confront the truth about what you're really feeling and why, you take back your power. The very thing you thought was weakness becomes the foundation of your strength. Most people try to fix loneliness by chasing someone else, hoping another person will silence that inner discomfort. What happens when that person leaves? You're back to the same place, only weaker than before because you've given them responsibility for your happiness. The shift happens when you realize that being alone isn't about missing something outside of you. It's about discovering everything inside of you that you've been ignoring. Alone time is where you start recognizing your patterns. You begin to see where you've been settling, where you've been avoiding growth, where you've been trading your truth for acceptance. It's in solitude that you get brutally honest with yourself because there's no one else to impress, no one else to pretend for. That honesty might sting at first, but it's also the doorway to transformation. When you stop running from being alone and instead lean into it, you discover how much power you actually have. You start to realize that your happiness was never dependent on the outside world. It was always waiting inside of you, buried under the noise. You stop looking at solitude as punishment and start seeing it as practice. Every time you choose to embrace it, you're strengthening a muscle most people never develop. And just like in the gym, the more you work that muscle, the stronger you get. Imagine living your life in a way where you no longer fear being alone. Imagine knowing that no matter who comes and who goes, no matter what changes in the world around you, you are solid. You're not dependent on anyone else's approval, not desperate for someone to validate your existence, not terrified of silence because you've turned silence into your ally. That kind of strength makes you magnetic. People feel it. They see it. And ironically, the more comfortable you become with being alone, powerful your connections with others become because you're no longer attaching to them out of need, but out of choice. The shift from loneliness to self-mastery begins with this simple truth. Solitude is not emptiness. It's space. Space for you to grow. Space for you to heal. Space for you to reconnect with yourself on the deepest level. If you can stop labeling it as something negative and start using it as fuel, you'll never fear being alone again. You'll welcome it because you'll know that in that quiet space, you are building the kind of strength and clarity that no one can take away from you. And once you step into that space with courage, you'll discover that you were never truly alone in the first place. You are simply being reintroduced to the most important person in your life, yourself. The truth is, every relationship you will ever have in your life mirrors the one you already have with yourself. If you don't love being with you, if you don't respect your own boundaries, if you don't enjoy your own company, then every connection you create with others will carry that same emptiness. You'll expect them to fill a gap that was never theirs to fill. And that's why people keep ending up disappointed, because no one else can complete you. Most important relationship you'll ever build is the one with yourself. And until you master that, nothing on the outside will ever feel like enough. Think about it. If you walked into a room and met someone who constantly criticized you, ignored your needs, never acknowledged your strengths, and always compared you to others, would you want to spend time with them? Of course not. Yet so many people treat themselves exactly that way day after day. They speak harsh words to themselves. They tear themselves down in ways they would never accept from a friend. Then they wonder why they don't feel whole. You can't expect joy to blossom in soil you've been poisoning with your own thoughts. Building a relationship with yourself starts with awareness. It's choosing to listen to that inner voice and asking, am I my own friend or am I my own enemy? It's noticing when you beat yourself up for mistakes instead of learning from them. You compare your journey to someone else's instead of honoring your own. It's recognizing that your worth doesn't come from what you achieve or who validates you, but from the fact that you are here, alive, breathing, carrying untapped potential inside you. When you begin to enjoy your own company, you unlock a new level of freedom. You don't need constant distraction. You don't need constant validation. You can sit alone at a table, take yourself on a walk, even travel by yourself, and instead of feeling incomplete, you feel empowered because you're not waiting for someone else to make your life exciting. You're creating excitement from within. That shift changes everything. It takes you from being needy to being abundant, from being dependent to being whole. And here's the beautiful part. When you strengthen that relationship with yourself, your relationships with others become healthier too. You're no longer desperate for someone to fill the void. So you don't cling, you don't settle, you don't tolerate disrespect. You start choosing people not out of fear of being alone, but out of genuine alignment. You attract stronger, deeper connections because you're coming from a place of strength, not scarcity. Some people think love is selfish, but it's the opposite. When you fill your own cup, you're able to give more to others without resentment, without strings attached. You're not loving them because you need them. You're loving them because you choose to. That's the purest kind of love there is. So how do you build that unshakable relationship with yourself? You start by keeping promises to you. Every time you tell yourself you'll do something and follow through, you build trust with yourself. That trust is the foundation of self-respect. You also start by celebrating small wins, acknowledging progress instead of only criticizing shortcomings. You make time for yourself, time to do things that light you up, that recharge you, that remind you of who you are outside of roles, titles, and expectations. Over time, you'll notice something powerful the more you nurture that relationship. The less you crave constant approval from anyone else. You become enough for you. And from that place, everything changes. You walk differently. You speak differently. You set higher standards. People sense it. The world begins to respond to you differently because the energy you give off is no longer one of lack. It's one of wholeness. The most important person you will ever learn to fall in love with is the one looking back at you in the mirror. Because when you fully embrace that person, when you build a bond so strong that nothing can shake it, you unlock a life of freedom, peace, and power. And that's when you'll realize you were never waiting for someone else to make you complete. You were simply waiting to recognize that you already are. Most people waste the time they spend alone. They see it as something to kill, something to escape from, instead of realizing it's the most valuable resource they'll ever have. Solitude is not a void, it's a container. What you put into that container determines the quality of your life. You can fill it with mindless distractions, endless scrolling, worrying about what others think, or you can fill it with growth, reflection, and the kind of actions that transform who you are at the deepest level. The moments when you're alone are the moments when you're free from performance, free from outside expectations, free from the need to impress. That is sacred space. That's where you can hear your own voice without it being drowned out by the noise of the world. And if you choose to use that space wisely, becomes the birthplace of your next level. Ask yourself, what would happen if instead of fearing solitude, you used it as your personal training ground? Imagine every hour you spent alone was an investment into your future. Instead of scrolling through someone else's highlight reel, you were sharpening your skills, reading, learning, creating, building something that pulls you forward. Instead of drowning in overthinking, you were journaling, reflecting, asking powerful questions that uncover the truth about who you are and where you're going. That kind of solitude isn't empty, it's rich. It's the space where ordinary people step into extraordinary growth. The great leaders, creators, visionaries of history all had one thing in common. They valued their time alone. They didn't just sit with it, they worked with it. They turned solitude into strategy. They used it to build their vision, to imagine what others couldn't see, to prepare themselves so that when the moment came to step into the world, they were ready. The same principle applies to you. Every minute you choose to use your solitude as growth time, you're separating yourself from the crowd. Because the truth is, most people aren't willing to do it. Most people are terrified of sitting with themselves, terrified of doing the hard work of growth in silence. That fear keeps them trapped at the level they're at while you have the chance to rise. Think about it like a gym for your mind and spirit. Alone time is where you strengthen your discipline, your creativity, your resilience. It's where you practice keeping promises to yourself. It's where you stretch the limits of what you thought you could do because there's no one to distract you and no one to rescue you. That's silence. That's where you build mental toughness. That's stillness. That's where you tap into clarity that can cut through all the confusion of daily life. But growth in solitude isn't always comfortable. Sometimes you'll confront truths you don't like. You'll see habits that have been holding you back. You'll realize how much time you've wasted running from yourself. That discomfort is the signal that growth is happening. Just like in the gym, the burn means your muscles are growing stronger. In solitude, the discomfort means your mind and spirit are expanding beyond what they were before. Most people turn away at that point, but if you lean in, that's when transformation begins. And the reward is freedom. When you know how to use solitude as growth time, you stop being dependent on the world to push you forward. You become your own driver. You wake up with energy because you know you've been investing in yourself. You don't fear the silence because you've turned it into your most powerful tool. When life throws challenges at you, you have the strength, the clarity, and the discipline to handle them because you built it in those quiet hours when nobody was watching. So the question is, how will you use your solitude? Will you run from it, wasting it on distractions that numb you but never fulfill you? Or will you embrace it, transform it, and use it to build the kind of life that others only dream about? Because when you turn your alone time into growth time, you stop seeing solitude as a curse. You start seeing it as the greatest gift you've ever been given. We live in a world that constantly tells us happiness is somewhere out there. It's in the next promotion, the next relationship, the next purchase, the next trip, the next like on social media. From the moment we wake up, we're flooded with messages that if we just get this one thing, then we'll finally feel whole. But the truth is that chase never ends. Because happiness built on external things is fragile. It shifts the moment circumstances change. The job doesn't last forever. People come and go. Money moves up and down. And if your sense of joy is tied to things you can't control, then your happiness will always be unstable. Happiness has to be redefined, not as something you find in the outside world, but as something you cultivate within yourself. It's not about waiting for the perfect conditions. It's about creating the state of mind that allows you to feel fulfilled regardless of the conditions. That doesn't mean you won't enjoy achievements, relationships, or experiences. Of course you will. But the difference is you won't depend on them to give you what you already have. They'll add to your life, but they won't define your life. The shift begins with gratitude. When you train yourself to notice what you already have, instead of obsessing over what's missing, something powerful happens. You stop living in a state of lack. You stop telling yourself, I'll be happy when, and you start realizing, I have reasons to be happy now. Gratitude changes the lens you see life through. It doesn't mean ignoring challenges, but it does mean choosing to focus on the blessings instead of only the burdens. And the more you practice it, the more you wire your brain to find joy in the present moment. Another piece of internal happiness is presence. Too many people live everywhere but here. They're either stuck replaying the past or worrying about the future, and they miss the only place happiness can actually exist right now. Being alone gives you the chance to practice presence, to slow down, to breathe, to feel life in this very moment without needing to escape it or control it. When you learn to find peace in the now, even in the simplest things, a sunrise, a cup of coffee, moment of silence, you realize happiness was never as complicated as the world made it seem. It was always about learning to fully experience the moment you're in. And then there's meaning. Happiness isn't just about feeling good. It's about living in alignment with something bigger than yourself. When you know what you stand for, what lights you up, what matters to you at the deepest level, life takes on a sense of fulfillment that no external achievement can match. Meaning turns ordinary days into extraordinary ones because you're no longer just existing, you're living on purpose. And that kind of fulfillment can't be taken away because it doesn't rely on circumstances. It comes from who you choose to be. So when you're alone and you think happiness is missing, remember it's not missing. It's misplaced. You've been looking for it outside when it's been inside the whole time. Happiness isn't in the crowd. It isn't in the applause. It isn't in the next big thing. It's in your gratitude for what you already have. It's in your ability to be present in the moment you're living. It's in the meaning you create through your choices and your actions. That's the kind of happiness no one can give you and no one can take away. When you redefine happiness as something internal, you stop chasing and start living. You stop depending and start creating. You stop fearing solitude because you realize that even when you're alone, you have access to the deepest joy possible, the kind that comes from within. And once you taste that kind of happiness, you'll never again confuse noise for joy, attention for love, or possessions for fulfillment. You'll know the truth happiness isn't out there. It's in here, and it's been waiting for you to claim it.